Welcome back everybody, my name is Tucker, and today's video is another episode of NBA Trade Machine, and this one covers Steven Adams. Now, if you've never seen this series before, every single week I ask you guys over on Twitter what player you would like to see be put in the NBA Trade Machine. Then I also ask for some potential trades for that player. I take some of your suggestions as well as some trades that I have come up with myself, and we kind of come up with a couple of different destinations and ways that this player could potentially be traded. And as I said, this week we are covering Steven Adams. First up, Israeli NBA fan, who was actually featured last week as well, says that Steven Adams would go to the Portland Trailblazers in exchange for Kent Bazemore, Rodney Hood, a first-round pick in 2022, and a second-round pick also in 2022. So first, let's start with the Trailblazers. The thinking here is that they still need more help at the 5 spot. Yusuf Nurkic is still hurt. They have Zach Collins, they have Hassan Whiteside, but Steven Adams would be immediately the best 5 on the roster in terms of the guys that are healthy right now. Nurkic, you could make a case they're kind of on the same level, but Steven Adams right now would be the best healthy center on their roster and would definitely help their team. They're giving up a couple of wings and some picks, but in terms of an immediate sense, this team definitely needs help on the defensive end, and Steven Adams could provide a lot of the things that they need. However, my issue with this is they're giving up so much of their wing depth with Bazemore and Hood, in addition to picks, and picks pretty far down the road in 2022. Being a first-round pick, it doesn't say anything about protections. That could definitely be an issue. And again, I'm not really convinced that they definitely need someone like Steven Adams on this team. In theory, it makes sense because, again, he would be better than Whiteside. But really, ideally for me, this trade would involve like a Hassan Whiteside for Steven Adams plus maybe a pick swap, so that way the Thunder can get out from under the salary of Adams. That's a benefit. They also get the pick, and then the Trailblazers get someone in Steven Adams that is better than Whiteside. And then once Nurkic comes back, they have a really good center combination. So initially, I can understand the thought here, but for the Trailblazers, this really doesn't make a ton of sense. And then for the Thunder, you're getting out from the contract of Adams with the expiring contract of Bazemore. You get a solid young player in Rodney Hood that could develop into something, or definitely could be a trade piece down the road. And then you're getting more picks to add to the pile. So I think this is actually fair value for the Thunder, considering that they're getting all 3 of the salary cap relief, the young player, and the picks as well, the first and the second round pick. And in 2022, again, not sure what the protections are on that. So for the Thunder, if I were them, I would absolutely say yes to this trade, because Bazemore won't be on the team next year anyway. You get out from under the salary, and then again, Rodney Hood, whether he's a long-term piece for this team or not, whether he fits the timeline of what is going to be a very aggressive rebuild or not, he is still a trade piece. He still has a medium salary, so if a star player comes available, Rodney Hood, having guys like that on the roster that are trade assets, that have movable contracts, in addition to all these picks that they have, it's really important to have players like that on the roster. More important to have those guys than it is to have players like Steven Adams making $28 million a year and not necessarily on the timeline of this team. So if I'm the Thunder, I'm saying yes. If I'm the Trailblazers, I'm saying no. Moving on now to a trade that I came up with, and this is Steven Adams to the Clippers in exchange for Zubac, Mo Harkless, and Jerome Robinson. All right, first up, let's start with the Clippers. The reason that I want them to make this move, and I think this would be a good move for them, is just because it shores up their 5-spot rotation even more. I have nothing against Zubac. I think eventually he's going to be a really good, productive player, not an all-star caliber player or anything, but he's still going to be a good player. But right now, Steven Adams is obviously a much better player than him at the 5 spot, better defender, better rebounder, things like that, and a really nice compliment to someone like Montrezl Harrell, who is just such a high energy, aggressive offensive player, rim roller, things like that. You kind of get the other side of that with Steven Adams, where he's someone that's very defensive minded, is going to lock down the paint, is going to rebound the ball extremely well, and is going to be able to do some things offensively as well. But Harrell's a better offensive player in terms of a role man. So that's a really nice contrast. And like I said, this is an upgrade over Zubac at the 5. And really, in terms of their current rotation, they're not giving up a ton. They're giving up Zubac, who they're replacing with Adams. Losing Harkless does hurt their wing depth a bit, but that expiring contract is going to be a big piece in trade talks. If they're going to look to move and make moves like this, then Mo Harkless is probably going to be involved because of that large expiring contract. And then you give the Thunder Jerome Robinson as well to entice them to actually make this deal as a younger asset, because apart from that, they're probably not all that intrigued in just the Harkless and Zubac combination. So for the Clippers, I really like this. I think it further improves their odds of being, in my opinion, the best team in the NBA. This is my championship pick for this season as the Clippers, and if they add Steven Adams to this group, I think it could be a really, really interesting addition. And then if I'm the Thunder, I'm probably saying yes to this as well. I think this is actually pretty good value for Steven Adams, depending on what the other trades are around the league that people are offering you for him. You could probably push the Clippers to add as many second-round picks as you want. They don't have really any firsts to trade because they've already done that, and these two teams have obviously already made trades as well with the whole Paul George thing. But you get Zubac, who could be a nice piece at the 5, and again, long-term as a movable contract as an asset potentially down the road, as I just talked about in the last trade. You get the expiring contract of Mo Harkless as well, and then you get Jerome Robinson, who is going to continue to be a name thrown around in possible trades for the LA Clippers. This combination of pick a player plus Harkless plus Robinson is going to be something that's going to be continually thrown around for this Clippers team, just because they don't have the picks, but they do have the expiring contract, and then they do have Robinson, who's a nice young player as well. So whether it's Andre Iguodala or Steven Adams or whatever, I would be very surprised if we get past the trade deadline and both of these guys are still on the roster, Harkless and Robinson. So continue to look out for those things. If you're going to be sending me trades for the Clippers, you're probably going to end up using some of those as well. I'm probably going to be using those as well. So keep an eye on those guys. I think it's definitely realistic and viable for them to move those pieces for an upgrade. And in this case, the Steven Adams trade makes a lot of sense to me for both sides. Moving on now, Toasty says the Hawks would send Damian Jones, Evan Turner, and either 1 first or 2 seconds to the Thunder in exchange for Steven Adams. Now, my first thought here when I saw this was, why would the Hawks trade for Steven Adams? Like, why would they be investing assets into a player at this point in the rebuild that doesn't necessarily fit the timeline? It's not like Steven Adams is old, but the Hawks are so young that it doesn't necessarily make sense to me at first. I guess you could argue that they're not really giving up that much, especially if they're only going to be giving up like 2 seconds instead of a first-round pick. If they did give up their first-round pick, they would either send them Brooklyn's, who they already have, or heavily protect their own, so that could be a possibility. But I mean, I guess I see this. Like, I guess I could understand why Steven Adams at the 5 would definitely help this team, bring them together, make them a little bit more formidable, potentially help them push for the playoffs this year. But again, I don't know if that's necessarily the goal of this team. And now in wake of the John Collins suspension as well, Adams would be a huge upgrade for them at the 5 spot. They're really only giving up Jones. They're giving up Evan Turner, who's an expiring contract. And then, like I said, maybe Brooklyn's first, their own heavily protected, or 2 seconds. So the value is certainly there in terms of what they're giving up compared to the player they're getting in return. I just don't know if it makes a ton of sense for their current situation for the Hawks. And then the other side for the Thunder, they're really not getting that much back for Steven Adams, and I think the other trades are likely better. The ones that we've talked about to this point are likely better than this one, unless somehow you're getting like a non-lottery protected Hawks pick, which there's just no way that they're doing that for Steven Adams. So it really doesn't make a ton of sense. I mean, you get the pick, I guess, if it's Brooklyn's, or you get a couple of seconds. Damian Jones, I guess, could be something at the 5, and then the Evan Turner expiring. So this kind of seems like more you're trying to fit in Steven Adams in a spot rather than coming up with like a trade that actually makes sense for both sides, because I think you can definitely poke holes in the argument and the logic of either of these teams making this deal if you really wanted to. So if I'm on either side of this, I'm saying no for different reasons. For the Thunder, it's just a lack of value. For the Hawks, it just doesn't make sense with their current situation. But again, I can kind of see where you were going with this. And then last up, Costas sent me a deal in which the Mavericks would be getting Steven Adams in exchange for Jalen Brunson, Courtney Lee, Dwight Powell, and a first-round pick. He says this deal takes Dallas to the top 4 in the West, in my opinion. Perfect complement with Porzingis for rebounding issues, and with Luka as a lob threat and pick and roll partner. Great screen setter to get shooters open too. I love this trade. And the first thing I want to say is, Costas, thank you for actually putting like an explanation in and kind of letting me know what you're thinking. It makes it a lot easier for me to pick your deal if I can actually understand the mindset a little bit here. And it also, of course, gives me a little bit more to talk about as well when you guys send in these trades. My first issue, though, with what you said was that I feel like Dallas is pretty committed to having Porzingis play at the 5 spot. I'm not sure that they want to play him with another like traditional big in Steven Adams and have Porzingis play the 4. I'm sure they'd be open to it at times, but for the most part, when I'm watching their games, Porzingis has been playing the 5. So maybe the complement with Steven Adams isn't as good as we're initially thinking that it would be, but assuming that they're willing to move him to the 4 and play him alongside Adams more often, I could see this being a deal that would definitely make sense for Dallas. Now, you are certainly giving up some depth when you're talking about giving up Courtney Lee and Jalen Brunson and Dwight Powell and a pick, and that's definitely something to consider, specifically with Brunson being a pretty good player in the backcourt, Powell being a pretty good player in the frontcourt, then Lee being a veteran presence on this team. That's a lot to give up, certainly more than any other team to this point in the video has chosen to give up for Steven Adams when you're talking about those three guys plus the pick. But assuming it goes well, assuming that he is a really good stabilizing defensive force, a good rebounder for this team, and unlocks Porzingis, because he has struggled a little bit to start this year, although I think that's just him knocking off the rust of not having played basketball in 2 years, almost 2 years at this point. All those things come together to create a situation that could potentially make sense for the Mavs to trade for Steven Adams. I'm not sure that this is the kind of trade where they want to start consolidating their assets into a player like Steven Adams before they really get going. They've played well to start this year, but I think they're still at least a year away from being a top 4 team in the West, as you mentioned. I'm not sure that this move gets them there, but I can see the thinking of potentially them thinking that they could get there. On the other hand, for the Thunder, Jalen Brunson is a nice young backcourt player. Like I said, Dwight Powell's a nice frontcourt player as well. And then you get the pick and you get the Courtney Lee expiring contracts. You get 2 good pieces plus the pick plus the cap relief. All of that makes sense. And like I said, to this point, this is probably the most value that any team has offered in any of these trades for Steven Adams. So if these are the 5 trades on the table, if I'm the Thunder, this is probably the one that I'm taking, but that can obviously be up to your guys' own discretion as well. All of this makes sense to this point. This is one of the better trades that was sent to me, which is why I ended up in the video. And again, I appreciate the fact that there was an explanation in there as well. But that is going to be the end of today's video, and I thank you all very much for watching. As always, if you have people you would like to see in the trade machine, if you have your own trades that you would like to send over to me, the best way to do that is in the comment section of these videos or over on Twitter as well. Please be sure to continue to send these things to me. I'm going to do one every single week. So if you want a chance to be in the video, then the best way to do that is to get involved. Send me some trade ideas, send me some players you'd like to see in these videos, and I will absolutely take a look. But that is, like I said, going to be the end of today's video, and I thank you all very much for watching. Once again, my name is Tucker. If you missed any of my previous videos, then be sure to check out the boxes on screen. Thanks again, and I'll see you all next time.